Regent. Good afternoon, daughters and special guests. On behalf of the Abigail Phelps chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, I am very pleased to welcome our American History and Christopher Columbus Essay Contest winners and their families. This contests are one of the highlights of the year for our members because they incorporate the objectives of the DAR, which are historic preservation, promotion of education, and patriotic endeavor. I would like to thank the teachers and parents who encouraged their students to participate. It was very evident that a lot of time and effort went into these projects. Along with having our chapter winners, we also have 4 state winners that will proceed to the regional level and possibly the national titles. You are all to be commended for your outstanding job. I would like to start our award ceremony with the American History Essay Contest. The American History Essay Contest was established to encourage young people to think creatively about our nation's great history and learn about history in a new light. This contest is open to students in public, private, parochial schools, and registered home study programs. Students in grades 5 through 8 are encouraged to participate. Each year, a selected topic for use during the academic year is announced, and contest instructions are published online and sent to schools by participating DAR chapters. Essays are judged for historical accuracy, adherence to the topic, organization of materials, interest, originality, spelling, grammar, punctuation, and neatness. Participating chapters send 1 winning essay from each of the 4 grades for judging on the state level. The state will send 1 winning essay from each of the 4 grades to be judged on a divisional level. The winning essay from each of the 4 grades will then be judged on the national level, and the winners are announced. Each student participant receives a certificate of participation from the chapter, and the first place chapter winners receive bronze medals, certificates, and a monetary award. State winners receive certificates and silver medals. National winners receive special certificates, medals, and a monetary award. This year's title essay was A Colonial Family's Reaction to the Stamp Act. March 22nd, 2015 marked the 250th anniversary of the Stamp Act. Passed by the British Parliament in 1765, this new tax required all colonists to pay a tax on every printed piece of paper they used. The Stamp Act was viewed by the colonists as taxation without representation. The students were asked to describe a colonial family's discussion about the new Stamp Act and what role it played in organizing the colonists against the British King and Parliament. Yeah, just like that. Okay.
It was a warm August evening in 1765. I was 12 years old and I was walking home from a forge where I had an apprenticeship. I was thinking how much harder it was than I expected. It was about 9 o'clock at night and I was exhausted after a day of learning how to shape a piece of metal. It was my first month of having an apprenticeship and I was sore and worn out. It was dark, but the various candles in windows and the bright moon provided enough illumination to adequately see. I was daydreaming about going to Britain, stopping the Stamp Act, and becoming a hero when I was yanked back into consciousness by sounds of shouting up ahead. There had not been a riot of any sort for weeks, certainly not in Boston. I broke into a sprint and came to an abrupt halt as a violent scene filled my vision. A large number of men from around the city, some of them I recognized, all of them angry, were gathered. Then with a surprise, I spotted my dad in the crowd. Without thinking, I ran down and joined him. Nobody noticed, and so I went right up to him and asked him, "What are you doing?" He looked down and was obviously surprised to see me because he exclaimed, "What are you doing?" I just replied, "That wasn't the question, Dad." He smiled at me and told me how they were gathering to mob one of the Tories' houses. However, he didn't know who was leading the attack or who they were mobbing, so Dad just told me to wait for whoever it was that was leading the mob to give a briefing to everyone gathered. About 5 minutes later, a man strode to the front of the group, and I recognized him as Ebenezer McIntosh, the shoemaker. I had read about how he served with the Loyal Nine, who were a group of merchants who were against King George III. He was well known for his mob on Andrew Oliver, the stamp master. The stamp master had control over all the tax collectors and submitted directly to greedy King George III. King George had ordered that the colonials pay tax on all paper goods, including legal documents, cards, and newspapers. The French-Indian War had been 7 years of expense, and King George erroneously believed that the colonials had a lot of money because of the expanses of fertile land in the colonies and the developed cities of Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. Ebenezer McIntosh's brief speech explained that they were going to mob Thomas Hutchinson's house. I remembered reading in a newspaper that he was the lieutenant governor of Boston who supported the Stamp Act, and his brother-in-law was Andrew Oliver, who was helping to introduce the Stamp Act in November. It revolted me to destroy a respected man's home, but I suppose that it was necessary if we would ever take steps to free ourselves from these terrible taxes. We started down the road with a roar, and I would be surprised if anyone stayed asleep for the terrible clamor we were making. But by the time we arrived at Thomas Hutchinson's house, Dad and I were in the middle of the group and eager to do something. But when I got into the house and started ripping up books, smashing bottles and sofas, and throwing papers into a bonfire, I began to feel sick. From looking at my dad's face, I thought he felt the same way, so I went over to him. He noticed me and took a break from attacking at a chair with his axe. "This is terrible," he said, "just terrible." He started hacking at the chair again, but with much less enthusiasm. I stood there for a bit, looking at the carnage that had ensued in the house, and then turned to my dad and pulled him out the door. Together, we ran into the black of night. As soon as we got back to our house, Dad made 2 cups of tea, and together we sat around the table to drink. After a long silence, Dad shook his head and began, "I don't know what to do. I want freedom from the taxes and all, but if we have to destroy places that have taken years to build and take people's happiness even if they took ours, I don't think I can do it." We were silent for a moment, then he said, "But we have to if we are to maintain our happiness and independence." "Yes, but we don't have to do it this way. We could fight on a battlefield in even terms and fight honorably, not like this," I said. Dad covered his face with his hands, intensifying the dark mood in the kitchen, although the candle on the table was lit and burning bright. "I agree, we don't, but who will make an army to fight the British?" asked Dad. "We could if we got the support from important people like Samuel Adams or Benjamin Franklin," I answered. Dad took his hands away from his face and looked at me intently. After another long moment of silence, he said, "Okay, chances are people will want to be a part of an organization like this. So if you write 8 letters to every patriot we know, I'll work out a plan to keep everyone active and interested in rebelling." So we began. We worked vigorously for the next couple of hours, but by 1 o'clock in the morning, both of us were ready to drop from tiredness. We climbed the creaky wooden stairs to our beds, thoughts of justice buzzing around in our heads. Yeah.
A colonial family's reaction to the Stamp Act. The mood in our home is as dark and cold as the approaching month of November, this year in 1765. Father has been angry for weeks, and my 2 older brothers, Samuel and Daniel, are whispering with him at the table again. My name is Elizabeth, and my family lives in Wethersfield, Connecticut, on a farmstead. Lizzie, come here, please. Mother said, handing me a skillet. Put the potatoes in the pan. I want to hear what your father is saying. Yes, Mother, I say, taking the pan, but I listen on the conversation. What should we do, Father? Samuel asked. Father slapped his hand on the table. This law is unjust. I say we join the Sons of Liberty, Daniel cried. Quiet down, Daniel, Mother said, cradling my sister Mercy. You'll wake the baby. I'm sorry, Mother, Daniel said, lowering his voice. But we can't bow to England's tyranny. The colonies need to fight back. Samuel put his arm on Father's shoulder. Father, we are still British citizens. We have family in London and Cornwall. Daniel poked the fire. Did you hear what Patrick Henry said down in Virginia? It was a bold speech he gave. I admire his courage. He had a wicked smile on his face. I'll not give up our right to self-taxation, Father says, pacing. Levi Alder says that he'll tar and feather the first tax agent that tries to take his money. I tried not to giggle, thinking of our neighbor, Mr. Alder, plugging chickens and chasing a tax collector. He was so old he could hardly walk. Mother rocked Mercy as she spoke. England is deeply in debt after the French-Indian War, John. They had to give such lavish gifts for their Indians for their help. And our relatives back at home in England pay much more taxes than we do. Why my father pays 26 shillings in taxes a year, while we only pay 1 shilling. It's only fair we shoulder part of the war's cost too. And how will we pay, Hester? This tax must be paid in gold and silver, Father said. What paper would we have to pay a tax on, Father? I asked, putting the skillet on the fire. Now, Lizzie, your mind, your manners. This doesn't concern you. Yes, Mother, Mother scolded. Yes, Mother, I said. Father sighed. Parliament says that the colonists must only use paper embossed with a revenue stamp. Ships, licenses, newspapers, pamphlets, legal documents, and even playing cards will be taxed. It hurts everyone, rich or poor, anyone who plans to marry, own land, open a business, or even buy a newspaper. Well, Sam Adams and Paul Revere are sure riling people up. Daniel continued. The Sons of Liberty insult stamp officials right in the street. They destroy the offices and burn the stamps in public. They even burned down the stable of the new stamp official in Boston, Andrew Oliver, and vandalized the mansion of Lieutenant Governor Hutchinson too. I heard Oliver resigned the next day. Daniel, that's enough talk of violence, Mother said, glancing in my direction. You're scaring your sister. She's only 10. If Ben Franklin couldn't get through them in England, no one can, Father said. Many colonists have agreed not to buy or sell merchandise until this Stamp Act is repealed. Patrick Henry has the right idea about all of this. Who's Patrick Henry? I asked. Daniel rolled his eyes at me. He's a member of Virginia's House of Burgess. He said that the Stamp Act has been forced upon us by a sick king and called George Grenville, the king's minister, weak and said the whole thing is illegal, unconstitutional, and unjust. Henry also said that any attempt to surrender our power will destroy British as well as American freedom. I heard that Thomas Jefferson was there and heard the whole bloody mess. There is lots of talk of yelling and talk of treason, Samuel added. Treason, Mother whispered. I would have taxed cider or ale, Daniel laughed. Why, everybody drinks cider and ale. My mother scowled at Daniel. John, I heard that this tax was going to help protect the frontier near the mountains. It's my understanding that nearly 10,000 troops are to be stationed there. Don't we owe some allegiance to the crown? Won't the colonists benefit the most from quartering the soldiers there? She asked. Father turned to Mother. Hester, the colonies had no representatives in Parliament when the law was passed. We are entitled to the same rights and privileges of the newborn subjects in Great Britain, but taxing us without our consent They have violated our rights as British citizens. Last year, the Currency Act made it illegal to print newspaper money anywhere in the colonies. This struck a harsh blow to our economy. Most had no gold or silver to pay debts or taxes because Parliament restricted our ability to acquire gold and silver through trade. Next came the sugar tax on imported goods. Father was becoming more upset. This tax is levied directly upon the property of the colonists. England has taxed us to regulate commerce, but this is different. This is dangerous territory. Are we British citizens or slaves? This act should not be passed without the approval of colonial legislators. What will people do, Father? I asked nervously. I couldn't help myself. All this talk was scaring me. Samuel turned and faced Father. Who do we side with, Father? His Majesty or the colonies? We are British citizens, but we are all colonists. But first, if we have to choose, I choose to stand with the colonies and act as a guardian to our liberty, Father said firmly. This new law will be a terrible burden, Samuel nodded. I agree, Father. There can be no taxation without representation. I swallowed hard and Daniel smiled. I wondered what will happen and hoped this would not lead to war with England.
The sky was filled with mammoth, dreary clouds that seemed to take over the landscape of the harbor. Within the air, there was a dreadful warning from the heavens that I would soon later decipher as I proceeded to fetch the newspaper. When I approached the paper boy, I saw a horde of people gathered around in the public square, shouting their thoughts about the latest news. However, I decided to ignore them and continued onwards to make my way back home. I trudged along the compacted dirt road up to a small, crooked house where my family resided. I flung open the flimsy door and stepped inside. Mother was churning butter, while my youngest brother, Oceanus, was running around making a mess with his muddy feet. Everyone else was doing their daily chores such as knitting, sweeping, and gathering firewood. Remember, please place the newspaper over there, Mother said, pointing at the chair placed in the dark corner of the room. The day continued on the same as any other, full of hard work and sweat. When the sun disappeared, we all congregated back inside our home to prepare for dinner. After supper was ready, Father burst through the door with an irritated look on his face, and we all took our places on the bench. We all knew better than to speak before he did when he was in a mood such as this one. He sat down before his plate, layered with succotash, ate a few bites, and then looked up, making eye contact with each one of us. Then he asked out loud, "Do you know what happened today?" And we all replied, "No." So he began to explain to us that there was a new tax called the Stamp Act that was imposed by the British. Father shook with rage as the words poured out of his mouth. The taxes would now be on all legal documents such as marriage papers, diplomas, contracts, and wills. Not only that, other items such as playing cards and dice would now be taxed too. It was terrible news for our family because my father is a lawyer. According to Father, the main issue is that the colonists didn't get to have their opinion heard when the tax was being discussed. I realized that the outraged people I had seen earlier were upset because of the new Stamp Act. I know the colonies would never be the same, and the relationship between us and Britain was about to change drastically. The colonies would fight until something was done about this act. Everyone was in utter shock at what they were hearing. We all sat there for a few moments, being silent, and then all at once we began to babble our thoughts on the topic. Within seconds, Father yelled at us to keep our voices down, and we obeyed without question. He explained to us how the colonists were already planning protests against this new act. The women of the colonies were already setting up petitions to be signed by their communities, and men were preparing for mock hangings of British tax collectors. Last but not least, many colonists were planning boycotts so the British could see that we would no longer use the items they had put the stamp on. Father told us that we weren't going to back down until something was done about this. You could tell that Mother wanted to say something, but she didn't want to interrupt Father, for if she did, there would be consequences. Finally, after what seemed like forever, Father let Mother talk about her ideas on the topic. When she spoke, her voice shook. The colonies have to realize that Britain has their reasons for imposing these taxes. It may have not been right of them to force it upon us without our consent in Parliament, but they did it for a reason. Everyone knew that England was in debt because of the 7 Years' War, but they were blinded by the fact that there was no taxation without representation from the colonies. I knew what Mother was saying was true, but Father disagreed. Her family members are loyalists, but she never mentions this to us. My father and his family are all patriots, which made it tense in the room when Mother spoke her loyalist thoughts out loud. Father shot back by saying, "Who cares about the reasons for this outrageous tax? We, the people of the colonies, have the right to make laws based on what we believe. The people of Britain do not live here, therefore they do not have a say in what happens to us." I must admit, both made a fair, valid argument, but it does not matter who is right. There are always two sides to a story, and both sides will fight for what they believe in no matter what. Despite Father's warnings, I still thought about the British and what they were thinking when they decided to impose these taxes. Surely they thought of the possible outcomes before they passed the new Stamp Act. I bet they had other ideas about how to raise money to get themselves out of the ditch they had dug, but others failed far worse. I glanced around the room and my eyes settled on the ground where the newspaper had fallen, where we had moved the chair for Father to sit on while he ate. The heading read, "The New Stamp Act Imposed by the British," in bold black ink. Just above the wording was a picture of a sinister skull and crossbones that said, "Oh, the fatal stamp." It was there to show that the colonists had an exceeding amount of disapproval towards this act. Not to mention their goal was also to show that the British and we would not back down until our thirst for freedom is satisfied. Time flew by as Mother defended herself and reasoning while Father did the same. Tonight, dinner lasted a lot longer than usual, but it stopped abruptly. Father claimed that he had had enough and we were sent to bed. We all knew that this was a hard topic to discuss because Mother and Father were on opposite sides and it was part of the colony's future. Our family seemed to be separated by two beliefs, and I know that this would not be the end of the discussion. There would be more news over the several months to debate among ourselves. Based on what I have heard so far, the future will only hold violent protest. The stars shimmered and glowed above while I laid my eyes sealed shut, waiting for sleep to take over. Thoughts raced through my mind as I predicted the fate of the land I had come to love. However, one thing that I knew was that the colonists would stop at nothing to earn their freedom and independence for future generations to come.
And now I would like to proceed with the Christopher Columbus Essay Contest. In 1966, the DAR partnered with the National Italian Foundation, NIAF, to sponsor an annual national essay contest in honor of Christopher Columbus. The contest is open to students in grades 9 through 12. Each year, the DAR and the NIAF agree upon a topic for use during the academic year, and contest instructions are published online and sent to the schools by participating DAR chapters. Essays are judged for historical accuracy, adherence to the topic, organization of materials, interest, originality, spelling, grammar, punctuation, and neatness. Judging at the national level is supervised by the NIAF. One winning essay from all those submitted is sent from the participating chapters for judging on the state level. The state will send one winning essay to be judged on the division level. The winning essay from each division is then judged on the national level and the winner is announced. Second and third place winning essays are selected on the national level. Each student participant receives a certificate of participation from the chapter. The national prize is awarded by the NIAF. This year's essay was Columbus and Lindbergh, A Journey Across the Atlantic. Students were asked to discuss the similarities and differences between Christopher Columbus' voyage to the New World and Charles Lindbergh's first solo flight across the Atlantic Ocean, and what effect did the 400 years between their accomplishments have on what each man hoped to achieve, the challenges they faced, and the skills essential to their success. I would now like to introduce this year's winner. This is not the first time this young man has placed first for his writing. In 2014, he won first place in the 8th grade division for his American history essay. In 2015, he placed first in the Hartford Stage Young Playwrights for Change playwriting competition and went on to win second place nationally. This year's Christopher Columbus Essay Contest Chapter and State Winner Award goes to Daniel Coppinger from Simsbury High School. Daniel.
If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea. The above epitaph, an excerpt from Psalm 139, verse 9 of the King James Bible, is etched on the simple gravestone of Charles Lindbergh. How fitting these poetic words are to compare to intrepid explorers whose journeys changed the course of history. Charles Lindbergh, a pilot at home in the air, and Christopher Columbus, a sailor at home on the sea. Similar experiences in the early lives of these two explorers gave them the skills necessary to achieve the success and fame each obtained in later life. While they were young men, Columbus and Lindbergh learned to become exceptional navigators and developed courage, self-discipline, determination, and self-confidence. Columbus, who was born in 1451, went to sea at the age of 14 and later attended navigation school in Portugal. By the time he was a young man, he had survived shipwrecks and pirate attacks in the Mediterranean Sea. He soon became a master mariner in the Portuguese merchant service. Searching for a new trade route to India, he reached the Americas in 1492. Charles Lindbergh, born in 1902 in Detroit, Michigan, also learned to fly at a very young age. He became a stunt pilot, expert mechanic, and inventor. He made his first solo flight in 1923 at the age of 21 and enlisted in Army flight training school 2 years later. While Columbus was surviving shipwrecks, Lindbergh was surviving plane crashes. But just as Columbus loved sailing, Lindbergh loved flying. In his book, The Spirit of St. Louis, Lindbergh wrote, "Air Service pilots' wings were like a silver passport to the realm of light." He made his historic solo transatlantic airplane flight in 1927 from New York to Paris, France, when he was only 25. Although they occurred nearly 400 years apart, there were remarkable similarities between Columbus's maiden voyage to the New World and Lindbergh's solo flight to Europe. Since neither Columbus nor Lindbergh had the financial means to undertake their trips, both men had to secure financial backing. Columbus obtained his through the Spanish monarchs of Ferdinand II and Queen Isabella, and Lindbergh through several St. Louis, Missouri businessmen who inspired the name of his famous plane, The Spirit of St. Louis. Both Columbus and Lindbergh connected Europe to the Americas through transatlantic travel, Columbus sailing westward from Palos, Spain, and Lindbergh flying east from Long Island, New York. Despite the large gap in time, both men chose to navigate by the same method. Carrying only a magnetic compass and charts, they both relied almost solely on dead reckoning to plot their positions. Columbus especially was distrustful of the primitive forms of celestial navigation of his time. Columbus and Lindbergh's voyages were at the mercy of the elements. Both relied on the wind to assist them, Columbus to fill his sails, and Lindbergh for strong tailwinds to conserve fuel and decrease flying time. Columbus, who depended on the ocean currents to help propel his ships, fortunately experienced nearly storm-free sailing despite leaving at the height of the Atlantic hurricane season. Lucky Lindy, as Lindbergh was known, often had to skim the tops of storm clouds or had to fly only feet above the water to avoid fog and bad weather. Columbus and Lindbergh had similar motives for their journeys: wealth and recognition. If successful, Columbus knew the royal court would reward him handsomely. His reason for seeking an alternate trade route to India was to secure gold, spices, and valuables. Lindbergh was looking for the $25,000 prize money being offered by Raymond Orteg to increase public and commercial interest in aviation. Both Columbus and Lindbergh were also ridiculed in their time. Columbus, in his own words, stated, "Those who heard of my emprise called it foolish, mocked me, and laughed." Many in the press called Lindbergh the flying fool. but there were differences, especially in the technology available. While it took Columbus weeks to reach land sailing, Lindbergh was able to finish by plane in only 33.5 hours. Lindbergh used modern technology to design and modify his plane. He added a lengthened wingspan and enlarged and strengthened the fuselage to carry fuel. In contrast, Columbus's ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, were simple, common trading vessels. His flagship, the Santa Maria, which Columbus despised, was a slow, fat, rented vessel designed for carrying cargo. Columbus operated on faith that he would reach India by sailing west and had no idea the Americas existed. Lindbergh, relying on gas, had to know where he was going and how far he had to go to get there. Columbus slept when he was tired, had human companionship, and could walk about. Lindbergh, flying all alone, could barely move in his small single-engine, single-seat plane and suffered hallucinations caused by sleep deprivation. Columbus had only an hourglass to tell time and primitive methods to track the speed of his ship. Lindbergh had a clock and airspeed indicator. Fortunately, he didn't have to deal with the lice, fleas, hunger, or thirst that Columbus had to endure either. People may misjudge the difficulty of Lindbergh's trip in comparison to Columbus's. 6 pilots had already been injured or killed attempting to cross the Atlantic alone, and Lindbergh's plane didn't have gas gauges, navigation lights, a parachute, or even a windshield. He couldn't afford the extra weight. To see forward, he used a periscope or banked the plane and looked out the side window. Pulitzer Prize-winning author Scott Berg wrote in his 1998 biography on Lindbergh, "On May 20th, 1927, as night fell, a modern man realized nobody had ever subjected himself to so extreme a test of human courage and capability as Lindbergh. Not even Columbus sailed alone." At the completion of their journeys, both Columbus and Lindbergh were hailed as heroes. Lindbergh received numerous honors, including the Congressional Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Flying Cross, the French Chevalier Legion of Honor, and the British Royal Air Cross. Columbus received the highest honors of the Spanish court. He was named Admiral of the Ocean Seas, received the title of Don or Noble, given a coat of arms, and appointed governor of the lands he discovered. Lindbergh said afterwards, "I was astonished at the effect my successful landing in France had on my nations of the world. To me, it was like a match lighting a bonfire." He was unprepared for the enormity of the world's response. Lindbergh truly had sparked the people's imagination and far exceeded his dream in popularizing aviation. He brought the world together to celebrate, and people gained a new confidence in air travel. Suddenly, everybody wanted to fly. Lindbergh had paved the way for global travel and was referred to by many as a modern-day Christopher Columbus. Columbus, who had always considered himself divinely inspired, died never knowing he hadn't achieved his goal in discovering a new trade route to India. But he did mark the beginning of continuous European colonization in the Americas, introduced Christianity to the new lands, and had an enormous impact on the development of the Western world.
The Abigail Phelps chapter of the DAR want to again congratulate all our American History and Christopher Columbus essay chapter winners and wish the state winners the best of luck in their respective divisions.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.